For most people in the online community, the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Lounge just works. As such, suggesting any drastic changes to how the system works will likely be met with some natural resistance by the current players. However, I think that the lounge has major problems when it comes to appealing to an outside demographic. It even has issues appealing to many players in the community, myself included, and I don't think this should be ignored. Worldwiding is an easier, safer option for many people, and in a sense, regular worldwides are a competitor to the lounge. If we want to win over more people, we need to make this as easy and as enjoyable as possible. It is hard to think about solutions to problems when many don't seem to think they really exist. So I've gone into this video thinking about ways we can fix issues for some without creating issues for others. To start though, I want to gain a list of issues that I want to solve. So here's a list of them. First is lounge being overwhelming to new players. Additionally, it seems that there's really no other options to play but 2v2 most of the time you queue up. This is particularly stressful for some first time players. There's a lot of dead hours, namely in the American evenings and higher tiers. This is something that affects me personally. There are mind games when it comes to queuing up because people don't want to potentially waste time, which ironically results in more wasted time usually. People rarely volunteer to host, and for a lot of people, the same 4 tracks are played every event, and that makes it feel a little bit stale. Anyway, let's tackle this. I will mainly just be sharing one idea that aims to potentially either eliminate or greatly fix all these issues. First out, I want to again credit Vike because this is mainly his idea. I just reflected on it and talked about it with others, as well as Ryan and Lee for providing more insight on why they think that this system could work as well. When discussing it more in the HD chat, Cinda, the lounge admin, actually discussed the possibility of the idea and made a Twitter thread afterwards where he goes over some of the positives and negatives. I'll have a link to his tweet and the poll in there in the description, but without further ado, let's get things underway. Please hear me out to the end because I'm going to back up my reasoning on all of these things. The proposal is to do away with tiers and make lounge run on cycles more akin to squad queue. These cycles could vary based on the activity we expect at any given time in the day. It would be a balancing act to ensure that people will always be able to play within a reasonable amount of time and in lobbies that are still competitive. The common pushback I see against this type of idea is that the system would suddenly force players to play with people way below their skill level. Firstly, there's nothing stopping us from allowing players to see projected rooms when people are queuing up to, get an idea of your opponents might be. You could leave if you think this is an issue. But secondly, in the current system, if enough people in your tiers don't queue up there, you don't play. You're not allowed to play with people outside those boundaries ever. But in the proposed system, if there aren't enough people in your tier that are queued up, you would still be allowed to play with the next closest fit. If that doesn't sound attractive to you, here's the great thing. Nobody's actually forcing you to play. The option would just be there for the people that want it. What doesn't get discussed though is the system is actually more likely to create the closest possible matchups, even compared to our normal tiers. If there's a good distribution of players across all MMR ranges, you will face people very close to your level, with little chance of being able to face players 1800 MMR below you during the active hours, which is something that actually happens pretty frequently in our current system. Initially, one might think that not allowing a Mogi to start whenever would decrease the amount of matches that happen per day, but I actually think the opposite would happen. This is because there would be an element of certainty that you can expect every single time you queue up. This is something that currently in-game worldwides have as an advantage over the lounge. While I was crafting the script for this video, I felt like taking a break and playing. I saw that tier CD2 was at 10 people, so I queued up and made it 11. Surely I played, right? Well, despite this being in the middle of the afternoon, usually when, the Europeans are pretty active in the night, it didn't happen, and this is mainly because there are a lot of mind games when it comes to queuing up currently because people don't want to potentially waste time. Of course, as I mentioned, this usually results in more wasted time. People typically don't queue up if a lobby is at only like 3 or 12 people. Hell, this group didn't play when the queue was up to 11, mainly because the momentum stopped. This is 11 people that wanted to play at a certain point who all ended up not playing. People literally make their decisions because of how they think others are going to act, not because of what they actually want. It's like trying to vote in America. In a continuous queue system, these 11 people would be thrown into rooms and perhaps they'd be split up into 2 different full lobbies, or maybe the next closest person to the queue that didn't have access to the tier would make it a full lobby. At the end of the day, the people are playing. I think what is also worth noting is that people would be less inclined to drop and more inclined to queue up entirely if they knew what they were getting. And that's the entire problem. 12 people who kinda want to play is not enough to create a lounge match right now when logically it should be. When you limit the possible player pool by tiers, this makes the problem even more apparent, because during certain times of the day, matches don't happen at all for higher tiers. A big reason I want the change is actually for selfish reasons, I admit. The times I want to play, which is mainly early American evenings, are usually pretty dead, at least in the tiers I play. And as someone who wants to stream lounge matches, this is quite unfortunate because I can't actually be ensured that matches will even happen. When matches do happen, there's also another less than ideal issue. Nobody wants to host, and there isn't really much incentive to. Now, I don't think this new system is a remedy per se, but if the continuous queue is timed well, you can actually pressure more people into hosting out of the fear of missing a chain. If a room were to take an abnormally long time, the next lobbies will already be closing by the time it ends, so if you don't get the host out in time, it's likely that you're going to miss your ability to, chain into the next one in a timely manner. So this sounds all fine and dandy on its own. Create a system that ensures people can play a match at X time if they queue up in time. This fixes most inactivity issues and all the frustration with trying to convince people to play when you do queue up. But thinking on it more, there's a lot more we could do with this. As it stands right now, 2 vs 2 is the most popular mode, and as such, it should be the one that gets picked the most. However, it's still a fact that a lot of people don't have it as their favorite, and for those people, you can't really play your favorite mode as much. If you did run scheduled queues though, you could actually pick a few times a day for these matches to be played on specific modes outside of 2 vs 2. Currently, there's very little chance to actually play your preferred mode unless it is 2 vs 2. And oftentimes, if you want to do something different, you just have to vote whichever format has the most votes outside of 2 vs 2, even if it isn't the one you really want to play the most. 2v2 still can be the most common mode, as it's the most popular, but allowing people to know what they're signing up for would be huge in my opinion. Maybe like 7 PM, it's like, okay, this is an FFA today. And you could even bring back Lounge 6 vs 6 on occasion in this system, because the people who sign up would be willingly doing it. I think this would have a potentially good effect for new players as well. We often forget that Lounge is a very intimidating place for new people, and if we want our player base to grow, finding ways to make it, more inviting and even more appealing than worldwide is necessary. I would personally feel a lot more comfortable advising a first-time player to queue up into an FFA time slot than, teams. And there's a lot of added pressure to not anchor teammates, especially in 2v2. And on a first match, many players could come to learn that they aren't ready for this level of competition. The most likely time we see somebody drop under 30 is when it's their first match and they're just overwhelmed. If people were to be able to start with FFA if they choose, we can avoid some situations where perhaps partners get upset at these people. The good news is that currently I have heard a lot of supportive partners exist in the lower tiers, but it's not every single person. Additionally speaking, I think a tier list system would also be easier to understand. It'd be more like a worldwide, you see a time to play, you enter, and the matchmaking's done for you. Everyone would share the same joining queue, so it'd be universal for everybody to know. We don't even have to stop with just mode selection either. I think the system would allow us to effectively test more things as well. For instance, it's a common complaint that we play the same 4 tracks over and over again in our matches, and I agree that it's kind of frustrating. There's 80 tracks in this game and you want to feel that variety at times, but I think just saying X courses are banned would be a little bit drastic. Personally, I think you could choose certain hours as experimental ones. For instance, if Lounge staff were to collect data on which courses got picked the most at what frequency, we could potentially run a queue at some hours that removes the most commonly played courses. For those who are into competitive Pokemon, thinking of it as like UU or underused is kind of the play here. People who still want to play with the most common picks would still be able to for most of the day, but for people who would really want to, try out playing with certain tracks off the table, or even potentially like a rarely used variant and so forth, we could do that without having to fundamentally change Lounge for a day or season. I know Dash had an idea of a bot randomly banning 20 tracks before a match also. We could test that in an hour window here, because why not? While track picks seem to be the common thought when it comes to customizing some of these slots, there's potential to try other custom formats too. I'm not saying it's something we have to do of course, but the option is there because of a new system. And the reason is that under a system like this, people would not only get more certainty in being able to play, but more certainty in what they are actually signing up for. And as someone who really has become bored of the Lounge formula as is, I think this would be just a really refreshing way to re-experience a competitive solo queue for this game, while not taking away what draws people to Lounge in the first place. So if you like the idea or want to try some things like underused tracks or having a format and mode schedule, feel free to say so, because I want to hear what you all think, and if you have any ideas that could fit, fire away. But most importantly, if the system at large sounds good to you, please consider voting and send us a poll found in the description. If this video releases when I expect it to, I think there should be a couple of days left, and he lists the potential positives and negatives in the thread leading up to it that I think everybody should be in the know about. So go check it out. I'm serious now. Do it. Alright, bye.